May the words that I speak and the thoughts and wonderings of all of our hearts draw us closer to God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. This week, we get to deal with the rather difficult story of Hagar and Ishmael, Sarah and Isaac. This is the story about when Hagar gets sent away. And we get to interpret this story in light of Jesus encouraging us, telling us that we will have to take up our cross and follow him, and that it could be really hard, that there could be divisions within families. It feels like a strange topic to deal with on Father's Day, but it is a hard reality for people every day, including Father's Day, that sometimes families are indeed broken. And sometimes our faith can be a part of why things are broken, or why we have chosen to deal with being estranged from people rather than pretending everything's okay. So in the story from Genesis, we have an ongoing rivalry. Sarah and Hagar haven't gotten along too well ever since Ishmael was born. See, Abraham was promised that he was going to be the father of a great nation. And as he and his wife were getting older and older and this child wasn't coming, they decided that perhaps they should go with an alternate means of creating their family. And Sarah's handmaiden, Hagar, carries carries Abraham's child, who will be named Ishmael. Now, some 11 years later, when it's even more of a miracle, Sarah conceives and she has Isaac. Our story takes place about 3 years after this, when Isaac is weaned, and they have a great big party to celebrate that. And my little bit of research indicated it was probably when Isaac was between 2 and 4 years old. And at this party, something happens. Sarah says Hagar and Ishmael need to go. Now, that's something that happens I've had a hard time getting my head around. I've looked up several Bible translations, and some say that Ishmael was mocking Isaac. Others say he was playing with Isaac. And when I found it was hard to get my head around it, I dug deeper and found out that the word that's used could mean anything from making sport with, to making fun of, to saying he was just simply celebrating that his little brother had passed this milestone. He transitions from being a baby to being a child. One of my hunches is that maybe Sarah thinks Ishmael's acting above his station. That she thinks that Ishmael should be stepping back into the role of the child of a servant and not threatening the role of Isaac, who is the one to fulfill the promise. But Sarah says she wants them gone. Abraham doesn't like this idea, but in the story, God says it will be okay, do what Sarah wants. I cringe at that, being in the story, but I don't fully understand. I can't be completely in Sarah's head to know why she wants to do this. Recognizing that she does want to make sure that her son is given the place of prominence, not her stepson. She wants to protect this child that she had in her old age, and maybe she feels that he was threatened somehow. I don't know. But Hagar and Ishmael are sent away. But God's plan is bigger. God's plan is more inclusive than anything we can imagine. Sarah might have felt like there were only two options. Either she accepts Ishmael and realizes that her son will share the blessing, or her son will take second place to Ishmael, or she sends him away and has him killed. And she can see only those two options existing. But God sees another way. God sees the third way. Because God has more than enough blessing to go around. So God ensures that Hagar and Ishmael survive, and God ensures that Hagar and Ishmael go on, that Ishmael becomes the father of a great nation. So God has seen a bigger, better picture than Sarah could imagine. So where does that leave us? For one thing, it challenges us to think outside of either or thinking. The idea that either one person is right or the other person is right and there's no in-between ground. But rather open ourselves to God having a different third way. A way that's beyond our imagining, if we slow down and listen and trust. Because families can be hard, and we'll be traveling throughout for the rest of June and then into August, we'll be dealing with difficult families in the Bible. If it tells us one thing, it tells us that having challenges with the family is not something that is new to our century. It's not something that's happened since 1962. It's always been there. Struggles and challenges trying to get along. It also tells us, listening to the gospel lesson, that it is okay to have boundaries. When things go wrong with your family, it is okay to have boundaries. If you are choosing what is right and best and healthiest for you, for your children, and that means you have to keep other people out, or that you have to put limits on how they can interact with you, that's understandable. Because having life and life to the fullest, as Jesus promises, sometimes means that we have to put up boundaries to protect ourselves. And that's okay. That we might find ourselves on different sides when we stand up for what is right. But following in the way of Jesus and standing up for what is right remains our call as Christians. Especially at this time, as we are facing challenges and divisions within our society, to know that God has counted every single hair on your head. And God cares what happens to you. You are worth more than many sparrows, as Jesus says. But what else is true is that God has counted every single hair on every single head. And if there's a group of people who are being overlooked, who are being forgotten, who are the Hagar and Ishmael of our world today, God is with them. God's eye is on the last, the least, the forgotten, the abused. And our eye should be too. That is who we are called to be as the church. That is where God is calling us. That is the challenge that is laid before us, is to see with God every person who is discounted or forgotten is a beloved child of God whose hairs have all been counted. And right now, that means God's eye is on those of African descent and other indigenous people around the world who are being overlooked, whose lives don't seem to matter. Now is the time that we are standing up and saying, yes, they matter. Because God has counted the hairs on their head, just like the hairs on your head. God will bless them. God blesses both Sarah and Hagar both Isaac and Ishmael. And God blesses us. And God blesses everyone else. Thanks be to God. Amen.